If 30 years ago you told me that Doom would become a story-heavy game where you ride mecha-dragons and collect fancy gems, I would have been a very confused baby. And yet, not only does Doom the Dark Ages have all of that, but also a bunch of badass heavy metal toys that would make any 10-year-old go rabid. But is it actually good? Does adding Captain America to Doom make the gameplay better, or is id Software finally running out of ideas? And do you need to play the previous games to even understand what's happening? After jumping in, the first thing that surprised me is that the Doomslayer is not actually a character. The story revolves around him, and the demons all collectively brown their pants whenever he shows up, but he's not really a character. He's more like a force of nature, a tornado ripping and tearing through anything in its path before disappearing as quickly as it came. It is a weird choice, but honestly, I think it was the correct one. I mean, how do you even humanize someone whose entire personality is a double-barreled shotgun? So why not lean into the absurdity and make him what is essentially a demon for demons? And the Dark Ages absolutely nails that. You don't just walk around, you trample over everything that isn't made out of sheer granite or a painting. And you don't do gentle landings either, you slam into the ground with the force of a meteor, turning any nearby demons into very delicious looking paste. Or maybe that's just me. Either way, the only thing undercutting the vibe is a bit of floatiness in the movement. When you're tearing demon hearts out, it is completely unnoticeable. But when you're doing any sort of precise platforming, the Doomslayer has a tendency to put on his ice skates and just kinda comically slide off the roof. It's not a big deal since he then puts on his wizard slippers and just teleports back up, but it is odd given how absolutely everything else just really nails the feel. The Doomslayer is an absolute beast, and the game never lets you forget that, not even for a single second. But this is a Doom game. We're not here to talk about our feelings. Does using the big bad boomstick make demons go splat? Oh yeah. Your weapons don't just down demons, they turn their bodies into a puzzle where you'll never find all the pieces. It is absurdly over the top and honestly kind of stupid, but let's be real, that is exactly why we're all here. But it's not just the visuals. A huge part of what makes the combat so punchy is the audio. Every weapon sounds heavy and powerful, like you're truly raining down hell upon the Hellborn. Even the basic machine gun, something that's usually a boring filler, has enough bite to make it deeply satisfying to use. But I especially love the sillier weapons, like the one that shoots a ball attached to a chain. Because let me tell you, there is just something cosmically funny about a 1,000-year-old super powerful cyber demon getting repeatedly bonked on the head with a bowling ball. I only really have gripes about a couple of weapons, and even then it's because they're just okay instead of great. For example, the basic shotgun is fine. It has a fine punch to it, and it turns enemies into a fine mist. In any other game, it would have been an all-star. But here, even its parents prefer the much cooler, much more successful brother, the Super Shotgun. But Bonkers guns are fairly standard Doom fare at this point. Where the Dark Ages stands out is in letting you take matters into your own hands. Or, well, power fists. Now these might sound like a gimmick, and at the very start I was genuinely worried they were going to be just that, but no. It doesn't even matter which one we're talking about. All the melee weapons really lean into the idea that the Doomslayer is a force of nature by just brutalizing everything in front of you. They are so satisfying to use that I spend most of my early gold, and yeah, the Doomslayer does actually collect gold now, beefing them up so I can just punch demons right in the nuts. And while I ended up covered in questionable fluids, I have no regrets. But the real star of the show is the shield, a very ironically named weapon given that you'll be doing very little actual shielding with it. Instead, it works like a boomerang that explodes and tears through smaller enemies. A bludgeon that magically transforms living demons into wall graffiti, or, if you're feeling really spiteful, a buzzsaw that can embed itself into bigger demons and very quickly ruin their afternoon. But my personal favorite is the parry. The ability to throw an enemy's attack right back at them, usually followed by a swift uppercut to finish the job. Time it right and you can pretty much negate every dangerous attack. And when you get into the right rhythm and start humiliating entire groups of attackers, the power trip is delicious. Now you might think this would make the game very easy, but the Dark Ages has a couple of tricks to keep you humble. I played on Ultra Violence, which despite its grandiose name is just one step above normal difficulty, and I actually died a fair bit. Why? Because the Dark Ages is a firm believer in bigger is better. Higher tier demons very rarely show up alone. Usually they're backed up by an army of absolute pests peppering you from every angle. None of them are particularly tough to deal with on their own, because remember, you can parry most of their attacks. But when combined, it becomes really hard to leave a fight without leaving a bit of yourself behind. But as much as the game likes to punish you, it isn't actually unfair. Health and ammo are scattered everywhere, and in a pinch you can even slap around a few demons to take their lunch money. On top of that, you can find life sigils which let you instantly revive upon death. So even if you mess up and a demon just starts gloating over your corpse, you can just kinda brush the blood off your brain, get up like some kind of a horror movie monster, and beat the absolute hellfire right out of them. Because of this, I was never bored. There was never a moment where I just started going through the motions. And as someone that relishes a good challenge, this made for a very enjoyable weekend, even if I was the one being turned into paste. But even more than a challenge, I love exploration, and the Dark Ages has a fair bit of that. While not every level is like this, there are quite a few gigantic, open-world maps packed with demons to slay and secrets to find. And honestly, they're great fun to run around in because there's always something cool around every corner. Maybe it'll be a giant hive of demons that need to get their faces rearranged, or maybe a short puzzle that will reward you with upgrade materials and weapon skins. My only real gripe here is that the game spoils a lot of the secret hunting by just marking all of them on your map. Sure, you still have to figure out how to actually reach them, but it feels less like discovering ancient treasures and more like crossing out a checklist. But it is still worth doing, because collecting gems and gold lets you upgrade your gear, and that is always a blast. The upgrades give your weapons new abilities and really crank up their power, so agonizing over which toy you're going to bless with badassitude is one of the game's quieter highlights. But you remember that mecha-dragon I mentioned earlier? It and a giant mech suit show up in a couple of gimmick levels. While that might sound like the game is desperately grasping for new ideas, it is actually done tastefully. The dragon levels are surprisingly fun as you get to explore massive, three-dimensional maps. There's also some air-to-air combat, but honestly, it's so filler it's barely even worth mentioning. But as stupid as Doomslayer and a Dragon sounds, it really does work, and it works surprisingly well. The mech levels are slightly weaker as it's mostly just you walking around and clobbering demon kaiju. But they're short enough and rare enough that they never really overstay their welcome. They're just a nice treat every now and then, and for a game as over-the-top as the Dark Ages, I really appreciate the restraint. The Doomslayer is the star of the show, and the game really does understand that. But what about the story I mentioned earlier? Well, there is a lot of it. A lot more than you would expect from a game where the main character communicates exclusively through violence. and sadly, most of it just isn't very good. Maybe it's because I never played Doom Eternal, so I don't have any sort of context, but the campaign was just a parade of random characters yelling random nonsense about things I didn't know or really even cared about. That said, it's not impossible to follow. Once you peel away the space octopuses and Baron Harkonnen, it is actually extremely simple. To the point where I mostly just zoned out, only really being stirred from my stupor by the Doomslayer doing something genuinely insane. So, do you need to play the previous game to understand the Dark Ages? Honestly, probably yes. But also, I really wouldn't worry about it. The story, for better or worse, is basically like a child making stuff up so they can get to the fun part, smashing all of their toys together. And when it comes to smashing, spectacle is the name of the game. There are no half measures. If something can be driven to absurdity, the Dark Ages will absolutely go for it. And considering how the game shines when the Doomslayer is an endlessly burning pyre of rage, pushing things to the extreme made for some genuinely memorable moments. And gorgeous ones too. Whether we're talking about demon bits flying across the battlefield or gigantic buildings that wouldn't be amiss in Warhammer 40k, the presentation is consistently strong. And this is without even mentioning the music, which, in classic Doom fashion, makes even the most routine demon removal feel like the climax of an action movie. The only area the presentation stumbles is in the background details. The sea can kinda look like Nickelodeon slime. When you're flying around, the soldiers on the ground are basically toys fighting cardboard cutouts. And even the big battles between mechs and mega demons are so slow and cartoony, they're more like a slap fight than an epic duel. But are these big issues? Not even slightly. But I found them to be too funny to not bring up. My guess is that they were intentionally simplified to keep the performance stable, which, to the game's credit, was rock solid throughout my entire playthrough. In fact, I am pretty sure the game runs on some kind of demon sorcery, because having it go from main menu to gameplay in less than 2.5 seconds is just wild. Which leads us to the most important question. Would I recommend Doom: The Dark Ages? Absolutely, but with one caveat. 80 euros is a lot of money for a 10 to 15 hour campaign, so if you can, do wait for a sale. That said, The Dark Ages is a blast, so much so that I ended up blasting through it in 3 days. It's loud, it's stupid, it is spectacularly over the top, and it fully commits to every single ridiculous idea it has with complete sincerity. It knows exactly what it is, and honestly, I love it for that. Because sometimes you just need a game where you have a giant hammer and the entire world is made out of nails. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, consider liking and subscribing, and I'll hopefully see you again soon. Bye bye!